Estelle is dying off in the eastern Pacific, and the tropics elsewhere remain quiet. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for July 21st. So, we edge nearer to the peak season in the Northern Hemisphere, but no sign of life yet really. The only feature active right now is Estelle, which is still a tropical storm, but continuing to weaken, and will be dying off pretty soon. It's barely surviving, hanging in there right now over there in the eastern Pacific. Day 51 of Atlantic hurricane season, and there's nothing on the radar once again, no areas of interest expected in the next 5 days. So far, just to jog your memory, we've had 3 tropical storms and no hurricanes yet to our tally this year. In the eastern Pacific, it's day 68 of hurricane season. Estelle's there and drifting out to sea, where it's going to continue to weaken and die off shortly. And an area of interest that we've marked at now 10%, down from 20 in the last update, because the models aren't really sure what's going to happen. It looks like there's going to be a few different low pressure systems competing. In the western Pacific, there's no areas of interest right now either, but we are still watching with one eye, the GFS suggesting that a storm might form in the next few days, but no other models backing it up, and the signal has weakened on the GFS. And in the Indian Ocean, there's no areas of interest right now either, and not expected in the next 5 days once again. So, generally a quiet scene across the tropical zones right now, and certainly no land areas under threat. Let's take a look at some satellite imagery then in the North Atlantic. This is how it's looking once again. A fairly quiet picture and a quite oppressive dry air situation by the looks of things there. It's very strong and common around the whole Atlantic Ocean. A few storms blowing up around Cuba and Florida today, and a little bit over the Yucatan. The Eastern Pacific area, you can see that Estelle is continuing to wither away and very small now in its stature, and you can see down the intertropical convergence zone lots of little thunderstorms blowing up, and it looks like it's going to be a rather messy situation down there for some time. Well, here's a look at Estelle, and bearing in mind I'm basically winging it because I can't see the latest imagery that you're looking at right now. Don't ask me why all this happens at every update. It's just things that just don't work properly, and it's not my fault. Anyway, Estelle is still blowing up some convection. It's partially exposed at times, you could argue, along the southern side. I mean, the clouds are just drifting around. It's loosening its rotation, I suppose you could say, and naturally that means a decrease in winds. We're giving it 45 miles per hour right now and a pressure of around 1001 millibars. Looking over to the western Pacific, there's a few little signs of possible rotation, but generally it's a pretty messy picture again, with convection over large parts of the eastern Pacific, eastern part of the western Pacific I should say, and a little bit over in the South China Sea as well, but nothing that looks like it's going to get its act together anytime soon. You can see that air mass or moisture mass that's moving through the Mariana Islands there. That was what the GFS was suggesting might be the next system. Indian Ocean, you can see the monsoon intensifying again in the eastern part of the Bay of Bengal, and a little bit over India, and down in the equatorial region there. And in the Australian region, a big blow up of cloud along the eastern coast of Queensland and New South Wales, which I believe are getting a very wet period compared to average down there at the moment. So more rain, it would appear, down in AU. Sea surface temperatures continuing to generally rise, although the eastern Pacific struggles every time a storm passes through. You can see the weakness there off the coast of Mexico, where we've had some storms already this season. The Atlantic, though, is more and more poised for that activity that we're expecting to happen anytime now, although the models aren't suggesting anything anytime soon. Gulf of Mexico getting to a little bit boiling, 30 degrees Celsius, and the Caribbean Sea 28 degrees at least. Indian Ocean looking decent in the Bay of Bengal, pushing 30 degrees. You can never rule out fully a system forming there at this time of year, but it's extremely uncommon. The Western Pacific Ocean, very warm there as well, 30 degrees plus, and a little tongue of that 30 degree extending all the way, almost all the way to Kyushu, Japan, and the 28 degree Celsius isotherm there, I think it is, extending almost to the Korean Peninsula. And you can see there from the anomalies that that is quite a bit above average in most of the important areas of the Western Pacific, except in the Eastern Micronesian island areas and the Marshall Islands, a little bit below average there. Eastern Pacific generally below average towards the central part, the eastern part is hit and miss. The Atlantic is generally above average in the important areas as well. And this is how it looks right now in terms of oceanic heat content, and you can see that the Gulf Stream starting to show up nicely on there as well now on the Atlantic, along with those really warm numbers, values in the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean. Eastern Pacific is still struggling as you'd expect, but some signs of life. Western Pacific is boiling and bubbling and ready to go as always. Checking out on the computer models then, and goodness knows what will come out of this and whether it's up to date for me or not. It actually is tonight. So Estelle dying off over there, and its circulation will survive probably a naked swirl for a little while longer. And look towards the east there, you can see a few little systems trying to get some rotation. There's that first one, and that's moving towards the west, and then something else throws itself out of Central America towards the end of that run, and that eventually starts to develop and tighten the circulation there as well, so we're not sure what's going to happen there. The Western Pacific, the GFS, there's that potential system. As you can see, it barely, in fact I don't think it does close off its rotation at all, so the signal's much weaker on that one than it was yesterday. And at the very end of this loop, at the 5-day period, you'll just about see the start of another system, I think, just further east, just east of the Mariana Islands. Yep, there it is, just at the end there. Longer range, day 5 to 10, you can still see Estelle's remnants, and this next system that forms eventually, competing low pressure systems by the looks of it, probably 3 of them, but eventually GFS throws this out and becomes a hurricane and possibly landfall there in Mexico on around day 9, that's July 30th there, for a potential landfall. That's quite a way out, so things could change quite a bit with that. Knowing that it's the GFS, that thing might not even form at all, and that's why we're giving it an uncertain 10% in the next 5 days. Western Pacific, what happens in the 5 to 10 day period? Well, you start to see this system, there it is, throwing up tropical storm force winds and eventually typhoon force winds. Another low pressure system there starting to develop. There it is, and blowing up quite quickly just south of the Ryukyu Islands of Japan, and that is quite possible for a track like that to happen. It actually gives me maybe a little bit of Noru vibes, but much weaker. I'm sure there's other examples to hand, but it is actually quite a small system as well. That's quite a way out. The Indian Ocean as well, GFS is never going to give up on this system, is it? There it is once again in the South Indian Ocean, a broad low pressure system becoming a tropical cyclone towards the end of the month. Let's see, when exactly does it form? Around about the 26th, so that's actually not that far out. That's day 6 from now, so you know, can't be completely ruled out, and it will enter the 5-day period tomorrow if it keeps up with that forecast, so we'll wait and see. At this point, that's all the serious stuff done, so you can scan that barcode and take a look at the Force 13 store for latest merch offerings, including our Hone special, but we're still waiting for Hone, and you can request animations on there as well, individual storms and full season animations. Into the Scilly range, there's that next tropical cyclone continuing along the coast of Mexico and then finding its death there pretty quickly, and then after that another tropical cyclone forms. Does it? It tried to, and eventually there's 2 trying to form there. Just at the very end of that loop, it sort of forms at the very end, and that's well into the first week of August. It would appear that the Eastern Pacific July wave train is mostly confined to July. It usually starts to wind down by the end of the month, and it looks like this season might be the same. But check out this typhoon. You can see there it gets to quite an intensity, probably category 3 there, before moving through the Ryukyu Islands and then going on to striking China, not far from Shanghai, which will get tropical storm force winds from that. But it probably won't, because that's on August the 3rd or the 4th, and that is an incredibly long way out right now. The Ryukyu Islands landfall there, that's on the 2nd of August, so it's, you know, speculative at best. But tracks like that can happen at this time of year, so I guess it's best to be on your guard. Oh, we don't go very far back on this day, we only go to last year, July 21st, 2021, when we had Infa, which was a category 2 storm, and if I remember rightly, that was one that hit China as well in a very similar location, so that's why you've got to be on your guard, I suppose. I think that was the one that did that, or did it sway further east? Senpako was weakening after its landfall in southern China as a category 2, was it not? And Felicia over there in the eastern Pacific down to depression status after its category 4 peak earlier in the week. Well then, let's take a look now to this year, and the next names on the list in the Atlantic, it's Danielle. In the Eastern Pacific now, we'll be looking out for Frank, and in the Central Pacific, we're still waiting for Hone. Yes. In the Western Pacific, the next name is Songda, and in the North Indian Ocean, it is Sitrang. The next storm would be number 37 of the year, and bearing in mind 92 is the average per year, we've still got a long way to go in the next 5 months of this year. In the Southern Hemisphere, the next name in the Australian region is Darian. The Southwest Indian Ocean will kick off with Ashley, and in the South Pacific, next up is Harley. That's all for tonight. We'll have another tropical weather bulletin tomorrow night.